Okay, everybody. In this video, we're going to be discussing some of the new selection features that are in more recent versions of Photoshop. We'll start off by discussing the Object Selection tool, which is now the default selection tool underneath the Lasso tool. It's paired with the Magic Wand and the Quick Selection tool, which you can learn more about in some of our other selection-focused videos. The Object Selection tool, fairly simple, fairly easy. If you have it and your document has been open for a while, it will already kind of separate it into what it thinks are the different selections. It highlights them in magenta. You can either kind of hover over something and then click on it to select it, or you can, if it doesn't already have that done, you can draw a little box over whatever you want to select. And then it should theoretically select it. And as you can see here, it's done a pretty good job of selecting my object. We can try, maybe if I didn't want to select the entire thing, I just wanted to select this part of this phone, I'm just drawing a box around it and then it has selected it. Or likewise, if I wanted to actually select the receiver, draw a box and then it will select it. You can combine these with your controls that we've talked about in other things. So if I didn't want to have the shadow, I could either select, deselect up here, or hold the Alt/Option key and draw a box around it, and it will remove it. Same thing here. I'm just holding Alt on my MacBook, and you can see that it has selected it. And if I wanted to add something, if I wanted to add this part, I can hold Shift, and it will add to my selection. So that's the Object Selection tool, which works the kind of the way you would think it would. Does not work perfectly for every situation, which is why we still have these other selection tools and that we've covered all the other ones. The other new feature, and what's come to be maybe the bane of my existence lately, is this what Photoshop calls the contextual taskbar. Let me double check that. Let's see. Yes, contextual taskbar, which you can toggle on and off under the window menu. We'll leave it on. So this kind of shows up and changes depending on what tools that you have selected. I currently have just this image open and I have a selection tool. So I have select subject or remove background. And you can see if I click on select subject, it selects the subject for me. Did it do a perfect job? No. In fact, it didn't even do as good of a job as my object selection tool did when we had that one loaded. I'm going to hit deselect by hitting deselect. It's still here. It jumps around. For me, the reason I'm not a big fan of this is because I find that it is always in my way. No matter how large of a screen I'm using, this is always where I don't want it to be. I can also just hit remove background. And what this does is notice that I was working on a locked background layer, right? And I hit remove background and it automatically unlocked my layer and then created a mask in which my background was removed. Now, as you can see, just like my select subject button did, this has not done a perfect job here. So what I can do is I can now click on either of these buttons down here at the bottom, subtract from mask or add to mask. And we've talked about masking before. I can just click on that and it will automatically, if I'm subtracting, it's painting black. I would, of course, zoom in and probably adjust the size of my brush, make sure I'm getting a more precise one. Or if there's something that I wanted to add, I would hit add to mask, and that's just, once again, masking. It's painting white in our mask to add to it. So not a perfect selection, but those features are there in case you want to utilize them instead. I, so far, have been defaulting to using my normal selection tool methods for doing that, but that is there. It probably is. It's a little more user intuitive. But it's not always going to get you the perfect result. So let's just review some of those features. Here, if I wanted to get rid of this guy, I've got my object selection tool, drawing a box around it, and it's automatically selected. Pretty good job as well. You notice that, once again, if I have the object selection tool, I can hover over something, and it automatically has that selected. Now, that does not happen as soon as you open something. You normally have to give it a minute, or there is a little object finder box up at the top that you can check and kind of toggle on and off, and it will look for the various objects in your images and try to load them. And then you can just click on them and it loads them as a selection. So that is the object selection tool. Remember that it works with your other shortcuts. So you can hold Shift to add to a selection. You can also hold Alt or Option to subtract from a selection. And then the other new feature we had was the contextual taskbar, which once again we can get rid of under the window menu. You can change all of how Photoshop works and looks under the window menu. And this one allows you to just easily select your subject. Now, what Photoshop defines as a subject may not always be what you think is the subject of your image. And this one has automatically given us generative fill as well, which we'll talk about generative fill and AI pretty soon. But that is an option there. So yeah, so that is some of the newer selection tools and features that we have in the most recent version of Photoshop. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.